A blind girl was cast out of her home on a rainy dawn, clutching only a tattered doll and the walking stick she had taught herself to use. The gates of the mansion slammed shut behind her, but when all seemed lost, fate had other plans. And that girl would one day return, stronger than anyone imagined. Subscribe to the channel for stories that touch your heart every day. The rain lashed against the windows of the mansion as the millionaire paced back and forth in his study. The crystal of the glass in his hand reflected the amber light of the lamp, casting restless shadows on the wood-paneled walls. His footsteps echoed on the polished floorboards, while his heavy breathing betrayed the inner turmoil that consumed him. Outside the study, in the dimly lit hallway, the little 7-year-old girl waited, clutching her rag doll. Her opaque eyes, which had never seen colors or shapes, were fixed on nothing. Dark, disheveled hair framed a pale face that had never received a fatherly kiss. "I can't take this anymore," the millionaire muttered to himself, swallowing the rest of his whiskey. "She reminds me of everything I've lost." The storm intensified its fury as he finally opened the door. The sound made the girl flinch slightly, but she didn't show fear. She was used to shocks and disappointments. "It's time," he said in a voice that tried to be firm, but trembled at the edges. "You don't belong in this house. You never did." The housekeeper, a woman with a wrinkled face and sad eyes, watched the scene from the foot of the stairs. Her gnarled hands trembled as she held a small suitcase containing some of the child's clothes and the white cane she herself had taught the girl to use. "Sir, please reconsider," the woman pleaded. "She's just a child, your daughter." "She's not my daughter," the millionaire's voice echoed through the mansion. "She's just a constant reminder of my failure, of her death." The girl didn't cry when he grabbed her arm with unnecessary force. She didn't beg when she was dragged down the hallway to the front door. She didn't scream when she felt the first drops of the icy rain on her face. It was as if she had always known that this moment would come. The iron gate creaked as it was opened. The millionaire placed the cane in the child's small hand, threw the suitcase on the muddy ground, and without saying anything more, turned his back. The sound of the gate closing mingled with the distant thunder. The girl stood on the sidewalk, the rain already soaking her simple dress, while clutching to her chest the only thing that truly belonged to her, a battered doll, missing an eye, with frayed yarn hair, a gift from the mother she never knew. The millionaire watched for a moment through the second-story window. The small, fragile silhouette seemed to dissolve into the rainy darkness. Something inside him wanted to run, bring her back, protect her from the world. But the fear was greater, the fear of loving again, of losing again, of failing again. He slammed the curtains shut and poured himself another drink. The storm outside seemed a perfect reflection of the storm in his chest. Somewhere in his conscience, an accusing voice whispered that this night would never be forgotten, that this child, so small and so strong at the same time, would forever carry the mark of this abandonment. And in the silence of the mansion, as the blind girl walked into the unknown, the millionaire felt for the first time that perhaps he was the truly blind one. The dawn had not yet broken when the girl, soaked and shivering, reached the end of the street of mansions. Her small hands gripped the cane as if it were an extension of her body. Each step was a discovery, each sound a compass in the world, of darkness that was her only knowledge. "Someone, please," she whispered into the void, her voice almost inaudible under the patter of the rain that was beginning to subside. The aroma of fresh bread was the first sign of civilization that her senses captured. Guided by the smell, the girl moved slowly until she found a door. Her fingers touched the rough wood, and she knocked timidly. The baker, a middle-aged woman with strong arms from kneading dough every day, opened the door and found that tiny, soaked figure with eyes that didn't focus on anything, "Good heavens! What are you doing out here alone, child?" exclaimed the woman, pulling her inside. "You're freezing!" The heat of the oven enveloped the girl like a hug she had never received. For the first time since crossing the gates of the mansion, she allowed herself to truly shiver, not just from the cold, but from all the contained pain. "My father. He said I'm a mistake," she finally spoke, her voice small but surprisingly controlled. "That I don't deserve the blood I have." The baker felt her heart clench. She wiped her hands on her apron and knelt before the child, then noticing that the opaque eyes didn't follow her. "You can't see, can you, honey?" The girl shook her head. "I was born this way. Mum died bringing me into the world, and he never forgave me for it." The baker wrapped the girl in a dry towel, offered her a piece of bread still warm, and promised to help. That same day, she took her to the municipal shelter, where abandoned children received the basic care that the state could offer. The shelter was an old building with peeling walls and windows that let in cold drafts. Children of all ages shared crowded dormitories and simple meals. For many, it was a nightmare. For the girl who came from the cold, silent mansion, it was the first place where she felt part of something. "Do you have a name, dear?" asked the social worker when registering her. The girl hesitated. Her father never called her by name. The few employees of the mansion referred to her as the girl or the boss's daughter. The name on her birth certificate was just a formality that had never gained a voice. "You can call me whatever you want," she finally replied. "I'm starting over." In the months that followed, the girl learned to navigate the shelter with surprising ease. Her fingers mapped every corner, every obstacle. Her keen hearing learned to distinguish voices, footsteps, the intentions behind the words. Where other children saw limitations, she found possibilities. One day, during a charity visit to the shelter, a nun noticed how the girl sat near the old, out-of-tune piano, touching the keys with curiosity, smiling as she heard the notes. "Do you like music?" asked the religious sister. "It's the only thing I can see," the girl replied, her fingers dancing on the yellowed keys. "When I hear music, I see colors." The nun, deeply moved, made the necessary arrangements. 2 weeks later, the girl left the municipal shelter to live at the convent, where she would receive specialized education and, most importantly, music lessons. Meanwhile, miles away, the millionaire watched the city lights through the window of his study. The glass of whiskey in his hand trembled slightly. On the desk, a sealed envelope contained the transfer of a considerable sum to an anonymous account overseas, not out of generosity, but out of guilt. A way to silence his conscience without having to face the truth. "She's better off without me," he muttered to himself like a distorted prayer. "Everyone is." But the echo of his words sounded empty in the enormous mansion, as empty as his heart. Autumn turned the trees in the mansion's garden into golden sculptures, but the millionaire barely noticed the changing of the seasons. The days dragged on, monotonous and cold, filled with endless meetings, aggressive negotiations, and sleepless nights. Financial success grew in proportion to the emptiness in his chest. "Sir, the foundation documents need your signature," said the new assistant, placing a folder on the mahogany desk. He looked at the papers with disinterest. The foundation had been the idea of his image consultant, an efficient way to improve his public reputation and, coincidentally, reduce his taxes. Helping underprivileged children was just a convenient side effect. "What's the cause again?" he asked without really caring. "Supporting exceptional talents in vulnerable conditions," replied the assistant, "mainly in the area of the arts." He signed the documents mechanically without reading the details. His thoughts wandered, as they always did in moments of silence, to that rainy night 3 years ago. He tried to push away the image of the small silhouette in the rain, but it seemed etched into his retina. "Any news about..." "That matter?" he asked, without the courage to be more specific. The assistant knew exactly what he was referring to. Every month, discreetly, she checked on the well-being of the girl, now 10 years old without her knowing, who was funding her support from a distance. "She's doing well," she replied simply. "The convent seems like a good place." The millionaire nodded, and that was the end of the conversation. His cowardice was greater than his curiosity, greater even than the love he was trying to deny. At the convent, the girl's life had been completely transformed. Her nimble fingers now glided over the braille with the same ease as they did over the piano keys. Her voice, once a timid whisper, gained strength in singing lessons. "You have a rare gift," said the choir director's sister after hearing her. "Perform a classical piece. It's as if the music comes from within, not just from your voice." The girl smiled, touching her own hands as she did when she was moved. "When I sing, I feel my mother close to me," she confessed. "Sister Helena said that she sang to me even before I was born." The nun made the sign of the cross, touched. Sister Helena, already elderly, had been a nurse at the hospital where the girl's mother had given birth and lost her life. It was she who, recognizing the child years later at the shelter, established the connection with the convent. "There's a song," continued the girl, her fingers finding the right keys without hesitation. "A melody I feel like I've known forever." The first notes filled the music room, soft, melancholic, with a complexity that seemed improbable coming from such young hands. It was an unusual composition, almost a lullaby, but with sophisticated harmonies. "Where did you learn that?" asked. The nun, intrigued. "I didn't learn it," replied the girl, continuing to play. "It's inside me. Sister Helena said it was my mother's favorite song, that she sang it while she was waiting for me." What the girl didn't know, and that Sister Helena kept as a sacred secret, was that that melody had been composed by the millionaire himself, a hidden talent of his youth, when love had not yet been suffocated by fear and bitterness. A song created especially for the woman he loved when they discovered they would be parents. Meanwhile, in the city, the millionaire had begun to attend charity events more regularly, not out of genuine philanthropy, but as part of a carefully planned strategy to clear his name and expand his network of contacts. "You seem distant today," commented a partner during one of these events. "Just tired," he replied dryly, watching a group of children performing a play on the small, improvised stage. Suddenly, a familiar melody began to play in the background of the presentation. The piano notes froze him in place, as if time had stopped. It was impossible. That music was private, intimate. It had never been published. "Where is that music coming from?" he asked, his voice betraying his usual composure. "Oh, it's an original composition by one of the students in the music program at the Santa Clara convent," replied his interlocutor, surprised by the reaction. "Talented, isn't she? They say she's blind from birth, but she has perfect pitch." The millionaire felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The pieces began to fall into place in a way he was not prepared to face. For an instant, he considered fleeing from there, returning to the safe isolation of his mansion. But something stronger kept him still, trapped by that melody that transported him to a time when he still knew how to love. That night, for the first time in years, he didn't drink himself to sleep. He stayed awake until dawn, contemplating the portrait of his wife that he kept hidden in the desk drawer. The decision he made before sunrise would change the course of 2 lives forever. The soft morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of the convent, creating kaleidoscopic patterns on the stone floor. The girl, now 12 years old, couldn't see these colors, but she felt the different warmth they projected on her skin as she walked through the hallways. "We have an important visitor today," announced Sister Helena, adjusting the girl's school uniform. A benefactor who has shown special interest in the music program. Is that why I'm so dressed up? Asked the girl, running her fingers over her perfectly pressed skirt. The nun hesitated, caressing the child's dark hair, now long and well cared for. How to explain that the visitor was actually her father, that the man who had abandoned her on a rainy night now, inexplicably, wanted to see her progress? "We just want you to make a good impression," she said finally. "You are our greatest pride." In the main hall, the millionaire waited, uncomfortable in his impeccable suit. His eyes nervously scanned the austere surroundings, searching for traces of his daughter in every young face that passed. The remorse, a constant companion these last years, seemed especially heavy that day. "Our director will be here to greet you shortly," informed a young nun. "In the meantime, would you like to see our facilities?" He nodded, following her through the silent corridors. With each step, he imagined his daughter growing up in this place, learning, developing away from the material comforts that his fortune could provide, but surrounded by something he had never been able to offer: acceptance. The sounds of a piano reached his ears as they passed near the music room. Instinctively, he stopped. The melody was simple, an exercise for beginners, but there was something in the interpretation, a sensitivity, an unusual depth. "Who's playing?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. The nun smiled. "It's her, the student you asked about." Without waiting for permission, the millionaire approached the half-open door. Through the crack, he saw the girl sitting at the piano. Her hands moved confidently over the keys, while her face displayed an expression of pure concentration. She was no longer the fragile child he had cast out. There was an evident strength in her posture, a dignity that intimidated him. "May I come in?" he asked, surprised by his own initiative. The girl stopped the music, turning her face in the direction of the unknown voice. There was something in that deep tone that made her heart race, as if a distant echo was trying to awaken dormant memories. "Of course," she replied politely. "I was just practicing." The millionaire entered hesitantly, keeping a safe distance. Seeing her up close, after so long, was like contemplating a mirror that reflected simultaneously his greatest mistake and his only possible redemption. "You play very well," he said, trying to control the tremor in his voice. "Thank you," replied the girl with a slight smile. "Music helps me see the world." That simple phrase hit him like a physical blow. While he had spent years wallowing in self-pity, his daughter had transformed her limitation into a portal to infinite possibilities. "Do you know this one?" she asked suddenly, starting to play the melody, that melody he had composed so many years ago. The notes filled the room, creating an invisible bridge between two souls, separated by time and fear. The millionaire felt his eyes burning, something he hadn't experienced since his wife's funeral. "Yes," he managed to answer. "I know it well." "It's my favorite," confided the girl, continuing to play. "I have the impression that I've known it since before I was born. Sister Helena says my mother used to sing it to me." "Your mother had a beautiful voice." The words escaped before he could contain them. The girl's fingers froze on the keys. Slowly, she turned her face in his direction, her opaque eyes seeming to penetrate beyond appearances. "Did you know my mother?" Time seemed to hang between them. It was the perfect moment for the truth, for the first step toward redemption. But fear, always fear, spoke louder. "Only by reputation," he lied. "I heard about her talent." A heavy silence settled. In the room, the girl resumed the music, but something had changed. There was a new melancholy in her interpretation, as if she sensed the lost opportunity. "I'll come back to hear you play again, if you'll allow me," said the millionaire as he said goodbye. "I'll be here," replied the girl simply. Upon leaving the convent, the millionaire made a decision. He wouldn't have the courage to reveal himself as her father, not yet, perhaps never. But he could, through the foundation, ensure that his daughter had every possible opportunity. Private piano teachers, scholarships, special equipment for blind musicians. Everything would be provided anonymously. It was cowardly, he knew it, but it was the only path he could glimpse at that moment. A tortuous path that, without him knowing, would lead to unpredictable consequences. The next 5 years passed like a carefully orchestrated symphony where two distinct melodies occasionally intertwined, never merging completely, but creating unexpected harmonies. The girl, now a 17-year-old young woman, had blossomed under the tutelage of the nuns and the specialized teachers provided by the anonymous benefactor. Her musical talent had exceeded the most optimistic expectations, turning her into a pianist in demand for benefit concerts and cultural events. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" asked Sister Helena, helping her prepare for her first solo performance outside the convent. "More than ever," replied the young woman, adjusting the sunglasses she wore in public. Her long, agile fingers, which knew every detail of the piano as others know the face of a loved one, nervously touched the silk of the formal dress, an anonymous gift that had arrived that morning. The dress was turquoise, her mother's favorite color, although she couldn't know that. What the young woman didn't imagine was that the millionaire had personally chosen the piece after weeks of researching old photographs of his wife. At the municipal theater, the millionaire discreetly occupied a seat in the last row. In recent years, he had become a regular spectator of his daughter's performances, always staying in the shadows, always leaving before he could be noticed. It was a cowardly form of participation. He knew it, but he couldn't find the courage for more. The young woman appeared on stage, guided gently by Sister Helena to the grand piano. The audience applauded politely. Many moved more by curiosity or compassion than by the expectation of excellence. Little did they know that they were about to witness something extraordinary. As she sat down, she adjusted her posture with the dignity of a queen. Her fingers landed gently on the keys, like birds finding their nest. The silence in the theater was absolute when she began to play. The first notes of Chopin filled the space, but soon the classical piece transformed subtly, incorporating elements of that familiar melody. The song her mother had sung, the music that the millionaire had composed so many years before. It was a masterful fusion, a dialogue between the past and the present, between perfect technique and pure emotion. In the last row, the millionaire felt the tears stream freely down his face. Each note was an accusation and a forgiveness simultaneously. Each chord, a wasted opportunity and a promise of redemption. When the performance ended, the audience erupted in applause. The young woman bowed in the direction of the sound, her face lit by a genuine smile. At that moment, the millionaire wanted to rush to the stage, embrace her, confess everything. Instead, he left the theater silently, as he always did. What he didn't expect was to find the director of his foundation waiting for him at the exit. "An extraordinary performance, don't you think?" commented the man, watching the boss's reaction closely. "Without a doubt," replied the millionaire dryly, trying to hide the emotion still evident in his eyes. "We're considering offering her a scholarship to the International Conservatory," continued the director. "Her talent deserves a bigger stage than local benefit events." The idea of seeing her leave, of losing even this distant contact, triggered an irrational panic in the millionaire. "I don't think it's the appropriate time," he replied abruptly. "She's still too young." The director watched him with growing curiosity. He had long suspected the special connection between the boss and the young blind pianist, but had never had the courage to ask directly. "With all due respect, sir, she's the same age your late wife was when you met at the music conservatory." The casual mention of this fact, which few knew, left the millionaire momentarily speechless. His past as a music student was something he had buried along with his wife, and all the dreams he had once cherished. "Have you been investigating my personal life?" he asked with irritation. "Just doing my job, sir," replied the director calmly. "As responsible for the distribution of scholarships, I need to understand the motivations behind your preferences." The millionaire approached threateningly, his voice reduced to a tense whisper. "My motivations are none of your business." "Perhaps not," agreed the director, maintaining his composure. "But the truth eventually finds its way to light, especially when it involves someone with so much talent and growing visibility." That night in his study, the millionaire faced the reality he had been trying to avoid for years. His daughter was growing up, gaining independence and recognition. Soon, questions would be asked, connections established. The press, always eager for scandals involving rich and powerful people, would inevitably discover the story of the abandoned blind girl. The simplest solution would be to step away completely, cut off funding, let her follow her path without his dark interference. But the idea was unbearable. At some point in recent years, that distant observation had become vital to him, like the only thread that still connected him to something genuine. There was only one alternative, however terrifying it seemed: the truth. Reveal himself, face judgment, accept the consequences of his unforgivable act. But would she be prepared for that? Would he? While these questions tormented the millionaire, at the convent, the young pianist played that special melody once more, her fingers finding the keys in the dark with the precision of someone who sees beyond physical sight. "Someday," she whispered to herself, "I'll find out why this music makes me feel so complete and so empty at the same time." What she didn't know was that this answer would come sooner than she imagined, and in a way that neither of them could foresee. The event hall of the foundation sparkled under the light of hundreds of candles and meticulously planned floral arrangements. The annual charity gala was the most important social event of the year, an opportunity for the millionaire to publicly demonstrate his generosity while establishing valuable connections with the business and political elite. "Everything is according to your specifications, sir," informed the organizer, handing him the program for the evening. "The orchestra has arrived, the menu has been approved by the chef, and the guest list is complete." The millionaire nodded absently, his eyes fixed on a single name in the program: special performance, pianist from the International Conservatory. There was no explicit mention of her, a detail he himself had demanded, but his heart raced. Just thinking about seeing her in that environment, his environment. "Confirm the details about the musical performance again," he asked, trying to sound casual. "The young woman will arrive separately, accompanied by her convent tutor. She will perform as agreed and leave immediately afterward. No interactions with the guests, as you requested." The plan was perfect in its cowardly simplicity. He could observe her from a distance, secretly take pride in her talent without the risk of a direct confrontation. That's how he had been managing the situation in recent years, and he intended to continue indefinitely. What the millionaire didn't know was that his daughter, now 19 years old and with a growing awareness of her own worth, had very different plans for that night. As she prepared at the convent, helped by Sister Helena, the young woman seemed unusually thoughtful. "Are you nervous?" asked the nun, adjusting the long black silk dress, another anonymous gift that had arrived that morning. "Not about the performance," replied the young woman. Her fingers played with the locket she always carried with her, the only tangible memory of her mother, found among the few belongings she had brought from the mansion on the fateful night of abandonment. "There's something I haven't told you. Sister Helena." The young woman took a deep breath, as if preparing for a deep dive. "I've discovered who my anonymous benefactor is." The nun paled, sitting slowly on the edge of the bed. For years, she had kept the secret at the millionaire's request. torn between loyalty to the promise made and what she believed was best for her protégé. How? Documents, signatures, repeating patterns. The young woman smiled, touching the braille sheets on her desk. Being blind sharpens other senses, including intuition. Sister Helena held the young woman's hands affectionately. And what do you intend to do with this information? Tonight, I'm going to play a special song, one that only the two of us really know. Her fingers slid imaginarily over invisible keys. I want to see if he'll have the courage to come forward or if he'll continue to hide as he has all these years. The hall was already full of guests when the millionaire made his triumphal entrance. Polite smiles, calculated handshakes, superficial conversations, the routine he mastered perfectly. No one could suspect the storm that was brewing beneath. The calm surface of his carefully composed face. When the lights dimmed gently, announcing the start of the musical performance, he positioned himself strategically, close enough to see her clearly, distant enough for a quick retreat if necessary. The young woman appeared on stage, guided discreetly by an event assistant. Her posture was confident, almost defiant. The black dress contrasted dramatically with her fair skin, accentuating a maturity that the millionaire was not prepared to face. She was no longer a girl. She was a fully formed woman, with the same ethereal elegance that her mother had possessed. Without any formal introduction, she sat down at the piano. A respectful silence fell over the audience, broken only by the occasional sound of glasses and whispers. The first chords emerged softly, almost hesitantly, the prelude to a classical piece that any music connoisseur would easily identify. But then, subtly, the melody transformed. The familiar notes of that personal, intimate song began to intertwine with the original piece, creating an entirely new composition. The millionaire froze, his champagne glass suspended in the air. It wasn't just the melody he had composed for his wife, it was something deeper, more accusatory. The young woman had transformed the love song into a lament, into a musical questioning that only he could fully comprehend. Around him, the guests exchanged impressed glances, completely oblivious to the silent drama unfolding. To them, it was just a brilliant interpretation. To him, it was a public trial. As the music approached its climax, the young woman raised, her face in the exact direction where he stood, as if she could see him through the darkness, through her physical blindness. It was at that moment that he noticed she was wearing the locket, the small musical note-shaped pendant that he had given his wife when they discovered the pregnancy. The last notes reverberated through the hall, followed by a momentary silence and then an explosion of applause. The young pianist stood up, thanked the audience with a small bow, and then, to the shock of everyone, especially the millionaire, spoke into the microphone for the first time. "Thank you for the warm reception," she said, her clear and firm voice echoing in the now silent hall. "This piece has a special meaning for me. It's called Reunion, and it was originally composed by the man who gave me life, and then banished me from it." A murmur ran through the audience. The millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins. "Many of you know him as a brilliant businessman, a generous philanthropist." She paused, smiling gently. "I knew him first as the man who threw me out of the house on a rainy night, when I was just 7 years old, because my blindness and my mother's death in childbirth were burdens too heavy for him to carry." The buzz increased. Confused looks searched for the host of the evening, who seemed to have turned into a pillar of salt. "I'm not here for accusations or revenge," she continued, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm here because I believe it's time to close this chapter of silence and shadows. I'm here because, despite everything, the music we share tells me that there's something to be saved." The millionaire took a step forward involuntarily, as if pulled by an invisible force. His movement attracted the attention of nearby guests, who instinctively made way. She perceived the movement, turning her face in his direction. "I recognize your footsteps," she said softly, now speaking directly to him, although everyone could hear. "I've always recognized them." The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. The millionaire walked slowly to the stage, each step echoing like a gunshot in the sepulchral silence. Upon reaching her, words seemed inadequate, insufficient. "How?" It was all he could ask, his voice almost inaudible. "The music," she replied simply. "It never lies. And this locket." Her fingers touched the small silver object. "Sister Helena told me it was with me that night. It has your initials and my mother's engraved on the back." He looked around, aware of the hundreds of eyes fixed on them both, of the growing murmur, of the phones discreetly raised to record the moment. His carefully constructed life, his meticulously cultivated reputation, all crumbled before his eyes. And surprisingly, that no longer seemed to matter. He began, unable to find the right words. "Not today," she interrupted gently. "There's much to be said, but not here, not like this." With a dignity that he would never be able to match, the young woman extended her hand in the air, an invitation, an opportunity, perhaps the last one. Trembling visibly, the millionaire took that delicate hand in his. And then, to the shock of all those present, and to his own astonishment, he fell to his knees before her. "Forgive me," he whispered, his voice choked with decades of contained remorse. "I didn't deserve you. I still don't." She touched his face gently, her fingers mapping the features she had never been able to see. "Forgiveness isn't something you deserve," she replied softly. "It's something you give." At that moment, under the astonished gaze of high society, the enigma surrounding the young blind pianist and the anonymous benefactor was unraveled in the most public and unexpected way possible. The secret carefully kept for so many years was exposed, vulnerable as a nerve. What neither of them knew is that this revelation was just the beginning of an even more complex journey, and that the true test of their newfound connection was just beginning. The days that followed the gala were a whirlwind of sensational headlines and incessant speculation. The story of the blind pianist abandoned by her millionaire father had captured the public's imagination, quickly transforming into a narrative of mythical proportions, part fairy tale, part family drama, part social scandal. Rejected heiress confronts father at benefit event, the abandonment that shocked society, the truth about the millionaire and his blind daughter. Musical prodigy reveals she's the disinherited daughter of business magnate. The millionaire. Watch the headlines piled on his desk with a mixture of horror and resignation. His publicist, a habitually calm man, seemed on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "I need to know exactly what happened so we can control the damage," he insisted, pacing nervously around the office. "This story could destroy everything we've built in recent years." "There's no damage to control," replied the millionaire, with a tranquility that surprised even himself. "Just the truth coming to light, finally." The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Partners demanded explanations. Sponsors threatened to withdraw support. Public figures, once friendly, now distanced themselves cautiously. The fall was dizzying but strangely liberating. At the convent, the situation wasn't much different. Reporters camped out at the gates, trying to get statements, photographs, any scrap of additional information. The young pianist had instantly become a celebrity, a symbol of overcoming adversity for some, of poetic revenge for others. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked Sister Helena, worried about the way things were going. "You can still back out, protect your privacy." The young woman shook her head, her fingers drumming unconsciously to the melody that everyone now associated with her story. "I can't turn back," she replied with quiet determination. "Not after having come this far. I have questions that need answers. I have a story that needs to be completed." The nun sighed, recognizing the same resolve she had seen grow over the years, the same strength that had transformed an abandoned girl into an extraordinary woman. "He asked to see you," she said finally. "He's been waiting in the chapel for almost an hour." The millionaire waited on the simple wooden bench, out of place in his expensive suit, his shoulders slumped under the weight of past decisions. When he heard the soft tap-tap of the cane on the stone floor, he stood up abruptly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the sacred space. "I couldn't refuse," she replied, approaching with the confidence of someone who knows every inch of the way. "After all, you came to me this time." There was a calm strength in her presence that deeply disconcerted him. For years he had imagined this moment, prepared explanations, apologies, elaborate justifications. Now before her, everything seemed inadequate, superficial. "I have so much to explain," he began hesitantly. "You certainly do," she agreed, sitting on the bench and indicating the place next to her. "Why don't you start with the truth about my mother?" The whole truth. The question hit him like a physical blow. Of all the questions he expected to face, this was the one he feared most. The truth about the past he had buried so deeply that he could sometimes pretend, even to himself, that he was someone else, with another story. "Her name was Elisa," he said finally, the words coming out hesitantly, as if unlearned. "We met at the music conservatory. I was studying composition. She was a pianist, the best I've ever known, until you." The young woman tilted her head slightly, absorbing every word, every nuance in his voice. "Everyone said I had a future as a composer," he continued, losing himself in the memories. "But my father had other plans. The family empire wouldn't be run by a musician. The choice was clear. The inheritance or the music? You chose the inheritance," she stated without judgment in her voice. "I chose what I thought would bring security for both of us," he corrected gently. "Elisa was pregnant. We had dreams, plans. A small apartment in Paris where she would give lessons and I would try to compose in my spare time." His voice failed. Years of repressed emotions pressed against the carefully constructed barriers. "What really happened?" she asked, noticing the hesitation. "On the day I was born." The millionaire closed his eyes, reliving the day that had divided his life into before and after. Complications during childbirth. The doctors tried everything. I had to choose. His voice was just a whisper now. "Between saving you or her. I chose you." The silence that followed had weight, density. The young woman took a deep breath, processing the revelation. Did she know I would be blind? "We found out during the pregnancy, a rare genetic condition," the doctors said. "They offered alternatives." He swallowed hard. "She refused them all. She said she already loved you too much, exactly as you would be." Tears streamed freely down the millionaire's face now. "After she left, I broke. The music, which had always been our connection, became unbearable. Every note reminded me of her, of our lost dreams. And when I looked at you, you saw the price she had to pay," she completed softly. "I saw my greatest success and my greatest failure simultaneously," he corrected him. "The life I saved and the life I couldn't protect. So I buried everything. The music, the memories, the feelings. I transformed myself into this man that everyone knows and despises now." The young woman reached out, finding his hand without hesitation. The touch, the first genuine contact between them in so many years, sent an electrical current through both. "Why did you come looking for me again?" Why the foundation, the anonymous gifts, the secret visits? If you wanted to get rid of me, why didn't you do it completely? It was the central question, the one he had asked himself countless times in sleepless nights. Because I failed to get rid of the only thing that made everything real. Love. For you, for music. As much as I tried to bury it, it persisted, like that melody you never forgot. Before she could answer, the chapel door opened abruptly. The director of the foundation entered hurriedly, his face tense. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but we need your presence immediately. There's been a complicated development." "It can." "Wait," replied the millionaire firmly, without taking his eyes off his daughter. "I'm afraid not, sir. Your brother is giving a press conference right now. He's questioning your mental capacity and filing a lawsuit to take control of your companies, citing recent erratic behavior as evidence." The young woman felt her father's hand stiffen under hers. "My uncle," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. "The man who never visited me, but who always wanted what was yours." The millionaire looked at her, surprised. "How do you know that?" "The nuns talk," she replied with a small smile. "And I've always had good ears." At that moment, he recognized in her not only Elisa's features, but also something of himself, the keen perception, the intelligence that saw beyond appearances. A connection that transcended blood, that even years of separation had failed to erase. "I need to take care of this," he said, getting up reluctantly, "but I'll be back. We still have a lot to talk about if you'll allow it." She nodded, her face a mask of serenity that concealed the storm of emotions within. "I'll be here," she replied simply, echoing the same words she had said years before in the music room when he had appeared as a stranger in her life. As she heard him leave, his firm steps fading through the nave of the chapel, the young pianist felt at a crossroads. The past, with all its pain and abandonment, was finally taking on comprehensible contours. The future, however, presented itself as an unwritten score, full of possibilities and uncertainties. Sitting alone in the silent chapel, she began to play softly in the air, her fingers dancing over imaginary keys. The melody that connected her to the past was transforming into something new under her touch. No longer a song of loss, but an unfinished composition waiting for its final resolution. The corporation headquarters pulsed with the nervous energy of a disturbed beehive. Employees exchanged apprehensive glances, whispers ran through the corridors, and the legal department had transformed into a crisis operations center. The millionaire strode through the imposing lobby with determined steps. The same people who days before smiled obsequiously now looked away, uncertain of how to react to the man who occupied all the headlines, not for his financial achievements, but for his deepest human failing. "He's waiting in the main conference room," informed his assistant, trying to maintain professional composure. "With the lawyers and journalists." The millionaire simply nodded. His brother's betrayal was not surprising. There had always been a silent rivalry between them, exacerbated by their father's decision to leave majority control to the older son. The timing, however, was perfect in its cruelty. Upon entering the conference room, he was greeted by a battery of photographic flashes and the hum of cameras. His brother, 10 years younger and infinitely more skilled at the game of appearances, stood by the window, displaying a carefully composed expression of fraternal concern. "Ah, finally arrived," he said, with false cordiality. "We were just discussing the next steps to protect the family legacy during your convalescence." The millionaire observed the scene with a clarity he had never experienced before. He saw beyond the appearances, beyond the social theater that had always dominated his existence. He saw the poorly disguised greed in his brother's eyes, the cold calculation on the faces of the lawyers, the insatiable hunger for scandal in the gazes of the journalists. A week ago, he would have played the game, counterattacked with equal force, used his power and influence to crush the threat, protect his position at any cost. But something fundamental had changed within him since that moment on his knees on the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, ignoring his brother and addressing himself directly to those present. "Thank you for your presence, but I'm afraid there will be no press conference today." A murmur of protest ran through the room. His brother took a step forward, his confident smile wavering slightly. "Victor, don't be irrational. These people are here to help clarify the situation." The company is fine," interrupted the millionaire. It was the first time anyone had mentioned his name in the whole narrative. Victor, a man, not just a title or a function. "In fact, it's better than ever. The latest financial reports prove it, as everyone here knows." He turned to his brother without hostility, just with a quiet firmness. "As for your concern about my mental health, Charles, I appreciate the belated interest, especially considering that you never asked how I was in the last 15 years. Some journalists hid smiles, sensing that the story was taking an unexpected turn. Charles paled, but recovered quickly. "Victor, your recent behavior, the episode at the event, the public revelation of, well, delicate family circumstances, clearly suggests a man who has lost control. As your brother, it's my duty." "Your duty?" The millionaire laughed softly, without bitterness. "Let's talk about duties then. You knew about my daughter from the beginning. You knew that I sent her away, and never in all these years did you question this decision or try to intercede." A heavy silence fell over the room. The journalists leaned forward, feeling the weight of the revelation. "In fact, you were the one who suggested the anonymous benefactor strategy," continued Victor calmly. "A convenient way to relieve my guilt without compromising my public image. Your exact terms, if I remember correctly." Charles looked around, realizing that the control of the narrative slipped through his fingers like fine sand. "This is absurd. I'm trying to protect the company, our family inheritance." "No," interrupted Victor again, without raising his voice. "You're trying to take advantage of a moment of vulnerability, as you always have." Turning to the journalists, the millionaire did something he had never imagined being able to do, smiled with genuine serenity. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have a simple statement. Yes, I abandoned my daughter when she needed me most. It was the biggest mistake of my life, a mistake I spent years trying to mask, minimize, and eventually correct in inappropriate ways. There is no acceptable justification for what I did." He paused, taking a deep breath. "As for the companies, I will continue to lead them with the same dedication as always. However, I will soon announce significant changes in our governance structure and philanthropic priorities." He looked directly at his brother. "Charles will remain in his current position, with all the responsibilities and privileges associated. I have no intention of punishing him for doing what I always encouraged, putting business above everything, including humanity." The irony in his words did not go unnoticed. Several journalists exchanged meaningful glances, realizing that the story of the day was not a scandal or a fall, but something much rarer and more valuable, a redemption in progress. "Now, if you'll excuse me," concluded the millionaire, "I have an unmissable appointment with someone I've waited too long to truly know." As he left the room, leaving behind the growing murmur, Victor felt an enormous weight being lifted from his shoulders. For decades, he had lived obsessed with building and maintaining his fortune and reputation. Now, paradoxically, by risking losing everything, he felt freer than he had ever imagined possible. In the car, on the way to the convent, he picked up his phone and made a call he had been postponing for years. "Dr. Martins, Victor Mendez, I need your help to finalize the arrangements we discussed theoretically," Yes, for the Music Institute. No, it's no longer a hypothetical project. I want to start immediately. Upon hanging up, he contemplated the city through the car window. The same streets, the same buildings as always, but everything seemed different. Now sharper, more real, as if he had spent his life seeing the world through a fogged glass that had finally been cleaned. At the convent, the young pianist waited in the inner garden, her sensitive fingers caressing the fragrant petals of the roses that Sister Helena cultivated with so much care. She heard the familiar footsteps approaching long before anyone else could perceive them. "You came back," she said simply, without turning around. "I promised I'd come back," Victor replied, stopping a few steps away, respecting her space. "And I have many promises to fulfill yet." She smiled, extending her hand in the air, not begging but offering. A gesture that perfectly reflected the transformation in both of them, from dependence to abandonment, from abandonment to independence, and now, perhaps, the most difficult of all steps, from independence to interdependence. "I have a proposition for you," he said, sitting on the bench next to her, "or rather, a dream to share." As the afternoon sun bathed the garden in golden hues, father and daughter began to plan not only their future, but the future of many others, who could benefit from their painful journey. The Music Institute for Special Children was about to be born, not as an act of empty charity or superficial atonement, but as the materialization of a shared vision of healing and transformation. The familiar melody lingered in the air between them, no longer as a lament for what had been lost, but as a promise of what was yet to come. The sun set over the city as the first guests began to arrive at the old restored theatre. It wasn't an ostentatious event like the Foundation Gala. There was no red carpet, celebrity photographers, or business elite in formal attire. Instead, an unusual mix of people crossed the open doors. Children from the municipal shelter, nuns from the convent, music teachers, employees of charitable institutions, and a few discreet figures from the artistic community. In the main dressing room, the young pianist adjusted the cuffs of her turquoise dress, an exact replica of the favorite dress her mother had worn at her last recital, recreated from old photographs that Victor had kept stored away all these years. "Are you nervous?" he asked, observing with admiration the extraordinary woman his daughter had become. "Strangely, no," she replied, her fingers running over the soft fabric. "I feel like everything in my life has brought me to this moment, like all the previous notes only made sense as preparation for this symphony." Victor smiled, recognizing in her eloquence the talent for musical metaphors that Elisa also possessed. The last 3 months had been a roller coaster of emotions and transformations. That it's never too late to heal wounds, acknowledge mistakes, and start again. She extended her hand towards the backstage area, a silent invitation. Victor hesitated for a moment. Throughout his adult life, he had carefully calculated every public appearance, planned every statement, meticulously controlled his image. Now he was about to expose himself completely, vulnerable and authentic for the first time. He took a step forward, entering the circle of light. A collective whisper ran through the audience as the father joined his daughter on stage. He was no longer the imposing and distant tycoon that everyone knew from the business pages. There was a new humility in his posture, an authenticity in his gaze that completely transformed his presence. "Tonight," he said, his voice softer than it had ever been in public, "we are not only celebrating the opening of an institution, but the closing of a circle that has remained open for too long. We are honoring the memory of an extraordinary woman, Elisa, who left us too soon, but whose legacy of love for music and for life continues through our daughter." The eyes of some spectators already glistened with contained tears. "For years," continued Victor, "I tried to bury the pain of loss under layers of material success and emotional isolation. In the process, I committed the unforgivable error of rejecting the greatest gift that Elisa left me. He looked at his daughter with a mixture of admiration and regret that no acting could simulate. Today, I don't ask for forgiveness. I know that some actions are beyond simple absolution. Instead, I offer commitment to every child who passes through these doors, to every talent that we will find and cultivate, to the vision of a world where no one is considered a mistake or a burden for being different. The young pianist took the floor again, her voice intertwining harmoniously with her father's, as if they were performing a carefully rehearsed duet. We invite you now not only to hear music, but to witness possibilities. The first students of the Institute will present pieces they have worked on during the last few months. Children with different stories and challenges, united by the universal language of music. She paused, a small smile forming on her lips. And to close the evening, my father and I will share something special, a composition that began even before I was born, and that we have finally completed together. And as the children of the inaugural program took to the stage for their performance, some in wheelchairs, others with Down syndrome, others coming from contexts of extreme social vulnerability, Victor and his daughter retreated to the backstage area. "You were magnificent," he whispered, genuinely impressed with her eloquence and presence. "I learned from the best," she replied with a touch of gentle irony. "Years watching you in corporate event videos and interviews. Sister Helena showed them to me, believing that one day it would be useful." Victor laughed softly, surprised once again by the complexity of the woman his daughter had become, capable of subtle humor, even in the most solemn moments, just like Elisa. During the next hour, the theater vibrated with the pure and unrefined energy of the children's performances. Notes occasionally out of tune, measures lost, evident nervousness, but also moments of transcendent beauty when some invisible barrier was overcome and the music flowed freely. Finally, the moment of the final performance arrived. Two pianos had been positioned in the center of the stage, facing each other. Father and daughter walked together to the instruments, sitting down in perfect synchrony. For an instant, the entire theater held its breath. The image was powerful in its imperfect symmetry. The powerful businessman and the young blind woman, united and separated simultaneously by the pianos between them. Without announcement or introduction, they began to play. The composition began with simple and hesitant notes from Victor's piano, the original melody he had composed for Elisa so many years before. Gradually, the daughter's piano joined in, complementing, responding, occasionally challenging, as in an intimate musical conversation. The piece evolved naturally, traversing moments of harmonic tension that reflected the years of separation and pain, moving to passages of cautious reconciliation, and finally opening into a resolution that, although imbued with melancholy, conveyed hope and renewed possibilities. In the final moments, the melody returned to its simplest form, but transformed by the journey, richer, deeper, truer. The last notes lingered in the air for a long moment before the theater exploded in applause. Father and daughter stood up, meeting in the space between the pianos. When Victor extended his hand, she accepted it without hesitation. Together, they bowed to thank the audience that was now standing. Among the tears and ovations, a new chapter began, not only for them, but for every child who would one day find in the Institute a place to transform limitations into possibilities, rejection into purpose, and silence into music. A year had passed since the inauguration of the Institute. The old mansion, which had once been a symbol of isolation and privilege, now pulsed with life and music. The once silent corridors echoed with children's laughter and musical notes. Rooms that had remained closed for decades had been transformed into studios, libraries of braille sheet music, living spaces. The young pianist walked through the remodeled garden, where sensory pathways allowed blind students to navigate independently among sound sources, aromatic plants, and tactile sculptures. Her fingers caressed the petals of a rose while listening attentively to the sounds of the spring afternoon. "I thought I'd find you here," said Victor, approaching with steps lighter than he had ever had in his previous life. The year of intense work at the Institute had transformed not only the physical space of the mansion, but also the man who had once hidden inside it. "The new student has arrived," she replied, turning in the direction of her father's voice. "I could hear him playing inside. He has a natural talent." Victor smiled, still marveling at his daughter's extraordinary hearing ability. "He barely played 3 notes. How can you tell?" "The same way you knew when you first heard me at the convent," she replied simply. "Some things don't need explanation." They walked together through the garden to the small memorial they had built in honor of Elisa. It wasn't grandiose or ostentatious, just a simple stone bench surrounded by her favorite flowers with a discreet plaque containing her name and the first notes of the melody that Victor had composed for her. "Today is 19 years, he said softly, sitting on the bench, "since she left, and 26 since the melody was born," completed the young woman sitting next to him. "Sometimes I wonder what she would think of all this." Victor closed his eyes, allowing himself to visualize Elisa, not as the image frozen in time that he had carried for years, but as she would be today if she were with them. "She would be proud," he said finally, "especially of you, of the woman you've become despite everything, despite me." The young pianist smiled, gently touching her father's arm. "Not despite you," she corrected softly. "Part of what I am is due to you too, the music certainly, the determination perhaps, even the years of separation shaped who I became." They remained silent for a few moments, absorbing the profound meaning of that observation. There was a wisdom in her perspective that often left Victor speechless, the ability to see the big picture, to find meaning even in the most painful experiences. "I received an interesting invitation today," she said finally, "for an international tour. 6 countries starting with the Conservatory of Paris." Victor's heart tightened momentarily. Paris, the dream that he and Elisa had shared, the future they imagined together before life intervened with its own plans. "You should go," he said, fighting the selfish impulse to want to keep her close now that they had finally reunited. "It's an extraordinary opportunity. I thought about refusing," she confessed. "There's so much work to be done here, so many children who need the Institute." Victor shook his head, although he knew she couldn't see the gesture. "The Institute will still be here when you return. These children need not only a safe place to develop their talent, but also living examples of what they can achieve." "Les." Young woman tilted her head, considering his words. "You're right," she agreed finally, "but I have one condition." "What?" "That you come with me, at least for the opening in Paris. To finally see the city that meant so much to you and my mother. To complete the circle." Victor felt a lump in his throat. The idea of returning to Paris, a place he had deliberately avoided for almost 2 decades, was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "I don't know if I can," he said honestly. "You can," she affirmed with the same unwavering certainty that she had always demonstrated. "Just like I managed to get on stage at that gala, knowing you would be there, just like I managed to forgive, even when forgiveness seemed impossible." Victor looked at his daughter, really looked, and saw, beyond the physical blindness, beyond the musical talent, beyond even the extraordinary resilience, he saw a woman who had transformed her pain into purpose, her limitations into gifts, her abandonment into strength. "When did you become so wise?" he asked, half in jest, half in genuine admiration. "Probably around the same time you learned To listen, she replied with a mischievous smile. Another echo of Elisa, another bridge between past and present. The official announcement of the creation of the Institute had provoked polarized reactions. Praise for the initiative, but also cynicism regarding the motivations. The press continued to unearth details about the abandoned heiress case, as it had come to be known. Former employees of the mansion gave interviews revealing the cold treatment the girl had received. Public interest in the story seemed insatiable. But while the outside world fed on the spectacle, father and daughter had embarked on a private journey of discovery and healing. Hesitant steps at the beginning, uncomfortable conversations, dense silences, unexpected tears. Gradually, a new relationship began to take shape, not based only on blood ties or shared guilt, but on a genuine desire to know each other as they really were. "The theater is packed," informed Sister Helena, entering discreetly into the dressing room. The nun, who had served as a bridge between two worlds for so long, seemed radiant at seeing the circle finally closing. "Have all the children arrived?" asked the pianist, her face lighting up with the mention of the first students selected for the Institute's program. "Yes, and they're buzzing with excitement. They never imagined being in a real theater, let alone as guests of honor." Victor observed the interaction between the two women with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Without the tireless dedication of the nun, without her unwavering faith in the possibility of redemption, this night would never be possible. "It's almost time," he said softly. "Are you sure you want to do this? We could simply play without the speech." His daughter smiled, standing up with the graceful elegance that had always characterized her. "The story needs to be told," she replied firmly. "Not just ours, but all the stories that it represents. Every rejected child, every ignored talent, every wasted potential. Tonight isn't about us, it's about possibilities." Victor nodded, offering his arm to guide her. She accepted with a light touch, but it was evident to both that she didn't really need help navigating the world. Her years of forced independence had forged an inner strength that no fortune could buy. They walked together to the backstage area. Through the curtain, they could hear the animated buzz of the audience, so different from the reverent and formal silence of the elite concerts that they both knew so well. "Ready?" asked the stage manager. Father and daughter exchanged a meaningful look, a moment of mutual understanding that did not require words or physical vision to be profound. "We are." The lights dimmed, the curtain opened. A single spotlight illuminated the center of the stage where a microphone awaited. The young pianist advanced alone, her posture erect, her face serene, without the cane that many expected to see, without hesitation in her steps. She knew this path as she knew the keys of her piano, intimately, instinctively. A respectful silence fell over the audience when she reached the microphone. "Good evening," she began, her clear and melodious voice filling the space. "Thank you for your presence on this special night. Some of you know me only through recent headlines: the abandoned blind girl, the rejected heiress, the pianist who publicly confronted her millionaire father." A light murmur ran through the audience. "These stories have sold many newspapers, I don't doubt," she continued with a small smile. "But like any good story, there is much more to be told than sensational headlines can capture." Her fingers touched gently on the locket at her neck, the physical link to the past that she carried always with her. "I was born in tragic circumstances, the daughter of a great love abruptly interrupted. I grew up in the shadow of a loss that deeply affected not only me, but also the man you know today as my father." She paused, taking a deep breath. "For years, I lived as many children still live, on the margins, invisible, considered less capable or less deserving because of my differences. My story could have ended there, as so many others end, in oblivion, in the waste of potential, in the perpetuation of cycles of rejection. Victor watched from the shadows of the backstage area, each word hitting him with the force of an undeniable truth. "But I was fortunate to find angels along my way," she continued, turning slightly in the direction where she knew the nuns were seated. "People who saw beyond limitations, who bet on possibilities instead of fixating on deficiencies. People who taught me that true vision doesn't depend on the eyes." Her voice gained strength and conviction. "The institute we are inaugurating today is born from this deep conviction that every child, regardless of their circumstances or apparent limitations, carries within them unlimited potential. That art, especially music, can be a bridge between worlds that seem irreconcilable." A gentle breeze passed through the garden, bringing the aroma of flowers and, more distantly, the sound of a child playing the piano. Hesitant notes, imperfect, but full of unexplored possibilities. "I think we should go inside," said the young pianist, getting up. "Our new student needs guidance." Victor nodded, offering his arm as he always did, a gesture that both knew was more symbolic than necessary. As they walked back to the transformed mansion, he reflected on the extraordinary twists and turns that life could take. For years, he had believed that his legacy would be measured in numbers. Fortunes accumulated, companies conquered, power consolidated. Now he understood that the true legacy was in the lives touched, in the possibilities created, in the bridges built between past and future. At the door of the main studio, they stopped to observe the 10-year-old boy who had arrived that morning. A refugee from a war-torn country, traumatized and silent, communicating only through the old electronic keyboard he had managed to bring with him. "Go," whispered Victor to his daughter. "He needs you now." With the natural grace that characterized her, the young pianist entered the studio, approaching the boy without haste, without expectations, only with the full presence that she offered to each student. "Hello," she said gently, sitting next to him. "I heard you playing. You have a song inside you that wants to be heard, doesn't it?" The boy looked at her with wide eyes, first at her serene face, then at the sunglasses that indicated her blindness. How do you know?" he asked, breaking his silence for the first time since he had arrived. She smiled, extending her hands over the keys without touching them. "Because I also have a song inside me, one that began even before I was born, one that guided me through the darkness until I found my own path to the light." Slowly, she began to play, not the sophisticated composition that she presented in international concerts, but the simple and pure melody that had connected 3 generations. The song that her mother had sung while waiting for her, that her father had composed in a moment of true love, and that she herself had transformed into an anthem of reconciliation. From the door, Victor watched the scene with a heart full of an emotion that took decades to name correctly. Gratitude. Gratitude for the woman he had loved and lost, for the daughter he had rejected and rediscovered, and for the music that, against all odds, had maintained the connecting thread between them all, even in the darkest moments. The melody flowed through the space, enveloping the traumatized boy who gradually began to play along. Hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, adding his own notes to the ongoing composition. And so, in a music studio in a transformed mansion, the true legacy manifested itself, not in grandiose monuments or accumulated fortunes, but in the simple and profound moment in which the pain of the past transformed into the possibility of the future, and darkness gave way to its own peculiar form of light. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.